have more details than before, we still have major outstanding questions in the David murder case. His movements, Celeste's movements, the alleged murder weapon, other potential charges on the horizon, who's going to testify, whether anyone else will be arrested or charged. We want to explore those unanswered questions right now.
The more one question refuses to go away. What does the evidence actually prove? Not what people think happened. Not what the headlines suggest. Not what the internet has already decided. What can prosecutors prove in court? Because in the D4vd case, there are still major unanswered questions. Where is the alleged murder weapon? How do prosecutors know what happened inside the home? Was Celeste pregnant? Or is that still unproven? What did the messages truly say? Where was David Anthony Burke between the discovery and his arrest? What was Celeste's full timeline before April 20 to 3rd? And will anyone else become a key witness? Or even face charges? Those 7 questions may decide how this case moves forward. David Anthony Burke, known professionally as D4vd, has pleaded not guilty. His defense says the evidence will show he did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez and was not the cause of her death. Prosecutors say the opposite. They say Burke killed Celeste to silence her before she exposed an alleged relationship that could destroy his career. Now the case is heading toward a preliminary hearing, and the question is no longer whether the allegations are horrifying. They are. The question is whether the evidence can survive the courtroom. Before we go deeper, like this video and subscribe to True Crime Greyson. This case is active, and every update deserves facts, careful wording, and respect for Celeste. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was 14 years old. That is the first fact that should never be lost. She was not just evidence in a criminal filing. She was not just a name attached to a celebrity case. She was a child. Her family described her as loved, full of life, and deeply missed. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. And while the public is focused on the singer, the Tesla, the charges, and the courtroom strategy, Celeste remains the center of the story. Everything else comes after that. The prosecution's timeline begins long before her remains were found. According to prosecutors, Celeste and Burke had an alleged relationship while she was underage. Prosecutors say Burke had been warned about her age. They also allege that, despite that warning, he continued communicating with her. They say the relationship became part of the motive. They say Celeste threatened to expose him. They say Burke was building a successful music career, with money, attention, and public image at stake. And they say that on April 23, 2025, Burke sent a ride to bring Celeste from Lake Elsinore to his Hollywood Hills home. She arrived. Then, according to prosecutors, she was never seen alive again. Months later, on September 8, 2025, her remains were found inside the front trunk of a Tesla connected to Burke. On April 20, 2026, Burke was charged with murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. The complaint also includes special circumstance allegations, murder of a witness, murder for financial gain, lying in wait. Those allegations raise the stakes sharply. If proven, they can bring the most severe punishment available under California law. But every allegation still has to be proven. Burke has pleaded not guilty. His defense is not just saying the case is ugly. It is saying the central claim is wrong. The defense says Burke did not murder Celeste and was not the cause of her death. That is why the unanswered questions matter. The first unanswered question is simple. Where is the alleged murder weapon? The medical examiner ruled Celeste's death a homicide caused by multiple penetrating injuries. That finding is central to the murder charge. It gives prosecutors a medical basis to argue that Celeste was killed, but the public record has not confirmed a specific recovered weapon presented as the final murder weapon. That does not mean the prosecution has no case. Many murder cases move forward without a recovered weapon. A prosecutor can prove a killing through a combination of medical findings, digital records, witness testimony, motive, opportunity, and behavior after the crime. But the absence of a publicly confirmed weapon gives the defense a place to attack. What object caused the injuries? Was it recovered? Was it tested? Was it tied to Burke? Was there DNA on it? Was there a fingerprint? Was there a purchase record? Was it connected to the home? Was it connected to the Tesla? Was it connected to any person besides Burke? These are the questions a defense attorney will ask. Not because the absence of a weapon automatically clears a defendant. It does not. But because it creates a gap the defense may try to widen. The prosecution may answer by saying the weapon is only one part of the story. They may argue that the timeline, the messages, the alleged motive, the ride record, the garage evidence, the purchases, the digital data, and the Tesla all point in the same direction. The defense may respond that pointing is not proving. That is the battle. The prosecution wants the court to see one connected chain. The defense wants each link examined by itself, and the alleged weapon is the first link viewers should watch. If prosecutors eventually reveal a specific weapon, the case becomes clearer. If they do not, the defense will likely ask jurors whether they can be sure about how Celeste died, what caused the injuries, and who caused them. That brings us to the second unanswered question. How do prosecutors know what happened inside the home? This may be the most important question in the case. Prosecutors say Celeste arrived at Burke's Hollywood Hills home on April 23rd. They say she was killed shortly after arriving. They also say Burke sent messages to her phone after she arrived, asking where she was, and that those messages were part of a planned cover-up. But the defense will ask a direct question. How do prosecutors know what happened after Celeste entered the home? Was there surveillance inside? Was there a witness? Was there audio? Was there a confession? Was there a statement from someone who saw or heard something? Was there a digital record from inside the home? Or is the state building the theory from timing, phone activity, and later evidence? That distinction matters. The prosecution may not need a witness who saw the killing. The law allows circumstantial evidence. But if prosecutors make detailed claims about what happened inside a room, the defense will demand the basis for those claims. How do they know Celeste died shortly after arrival? How do they know Burke was with her at that moment? How do they know he caused the fatal injuries? How do they know he did not call for help? How do they know the messages were staged? The prosecution may say the answer is in the timeline. Celeste arrived. Her communication stopped. Messages were sent to her phone soon after. Burke allegedly traveled later that night. Prosecutors say he made purchases after her death. They say evidence was found in the garage. They say her remains were later found in the Tesla. When placed together, prosecutors may argue the timeline speaks clearly. The defense will answer that a timeline is not the same as direct proof. A timeline can suggest, a timeline can support, a timeline can persuade. But the defense will ask whether it proves the specific act of murder beyond the legal standard. That is why the inside-the-home question matters. The state's theory centers on what happened in that home. The defense will try to make that home a black box. They may say the public knows what prosecutors think happened, but not how prosecutors can prove it. And if the defense can make jurors feel that the most important minutes remain uncertain, the entire case becomes harder. The prosecution will likely argue there is no innocent explanation for all the evidence together. The defense will argue the prosecution is filling gaps with assumptions. The jury, if the case reaches trial, will be asked to decide which version fits the evidence. The third unanswered question is one that has spread across the internet. Was Celeste pregnant? This question must be handled carefully. Public reporting says prosecutors referenced messages involving pregnancy, abortion, and emergency contraception. That is important because those messages may be part of the prosecution's motive theory. If Celeste was threatening to expose Burke, and if messages show fear around pregnancy, prosecutors may argue the pressure was rising. But pregnancy has not been confirmed as a public fact. An updated death certificate stated that it was unclear whether Celeste had been pregnant in the year before her death. That word matters. Unclear, not confirmed, not proven, not established, unclear. There is a major difference between messages that discuss pregnancy and medical proof that pregnancy existed. The defense may use that distinction. If the public assumes pregnancy was confirmed, the defense may argue that assumption is wrong. If prosecutors use the messages for motive, the defense may ask whether the messages are being overinterpreted. Were they literal? Were they emotional? Were they based on fear? Were they part of a longer conversation? What was the full context? Did any medical evidence confirm the claim? If prosecutors had definitive proof of pregnancy, it would likely be one of the strongest motive points in the case. But public reporting does not show that proof, so the safe conclusion is this: pregnancy remains unresolved in the public record. It may still matter because the messages may show conflict, pressure, or fear, but we should not treat it as confirmed. That is important because people can turn an unanswered question into a fact too quickly. And once a claim spreads, it becomes hard to correct. Celeste's story is already tragic. It does not need unproven certainty to make it powerful. The fourth unanswered question is about the messages. What did they really say? Prosecutors say messages between Burke and Celeste on April 22nd and April 23rd showed conflict. They say Celeste was angry. They say she threatened to disclose damaging information that could hurt Burke's career. That claim is central to the motive theory, but the public has not seen the full message history. That means the full context remains unknown. What exactly did Celeste say? What exactly did Burke say? Was the threat direct? Was it repeated? Was it emotional language during an argument? Did she identify what she planned to expose? Did he respond with fear, anger, apology, or denial? Were messages deleted? Were they recovered from iCloud? Were timestamps complete? Were there voice notes? Were there calls? Were there other apps involved? Was the conversation continuous or broken into fragments? These details matter because a message can change meaning when taken out of context. One sentence can sound like a threat. A longer conversation can show panic, sarcasm, fear, manipulation, or something else. The prosecution will likely argue the messages show motive. They may say Celeste was ready to expose the alleged illegal relationship. They may say Burke understood the danger to his public image and career. The defense may argue the prosecution is choosing the most damaging interpretation. They may say people say extreme things during emotional arguments. They may say a threat does not prove murder. They may say the messages show conflict, but not a plan to kill. They may say the timeline after the messages is built on assumption. Again, motive is powerful, but motive is not enough. Prosecutors need motive plus opportunity plus proof. The messages may become the emotional center of the case because they may show Celeste trying to take back control. If prosecutors prove she was threatening to speak, then the alleged motive becomes stronger. But the defense will likely fight the meaning of every line. The messages also matter to the alleged sexual relationship. Prosecutors say digital evidence supports the claim that Burke and Celeste had an illegal relationship while she was underage. If that evidence is strong, the defense faces a difficult battle. But even then, the defense may try to separate the abuse charge from the murder charge. They may argue that even if jurors believe one allegation, they still must decide the murder charge separately. The prosecution will argue the charges are connected. They will say the alleged relationship created the motive. They will say Celeste became a witness. They will say her threat to expose Burke led to her death. The defense will say the state still must prove the final act. This is why the messages are so important. They may link the alleged relationship to motive. They may link motive to the final night. They may show whether the prosecution's theory is grounded in clear words or built from interpretation. The fifth unanswered question moves away from April 23rd and looks at the months after the case became public. Where was Burke between the discovery of Celeste's remains and his arrest? Celeste's remains were found in September 2025. Burke was not arrested until April 2026. That is a long gap. During that period, the public saw parts of the investigation unfold. Searches happened. Evidence was collected. Officials moved carefully. Burke canceled tour dates. His public presence changed sharply. But many details remain unknown. Where was he staying? Who was he speaking to? What did investigators know at that time? Was he being monitored? Did he communicate with potential witnesses? Did he move property? Did he delete anything? Did he make statements to friends, family, business associates, or law enforcement? Did he stay near Los Angeles? Did he return to the home? Did investigators recover communications from that period? Did his behavior after September become evidence? These questions matter because conduct after discovery can become important. A person's behavior after a crime does not prove guilt by itself, but prosecutors can use certain actions to argue consciousness of guilt. The defense can argue the same conduct has innocent explanations. Silence, panic, withdrawal, canceling events, changing routines, hiring lawyers, and avoiding public attention can all be interpreted differently depending on the evidence. Burke was a public figure. After Celeste was identified, the pressure around him became intense. If he stayed silent, the defense may say that is what any lawyer would advise. If he moved, the defense may say it was for safety or privacy. If he canceled shows, the defense may say the situation made public performance impossible. But if prosecutors have messages or actions from that period showing knowledge, planning, or concealment, those details could become powerful. The public does not know the full answer yet. That makes the months between September and April one of the quieter, but potentially important parts of the case. The prosecution may have more evidence from that time than has been revealed. The defense will want to know every piece of it. The sixth unanswered question turns back to Celeste. What was her full timeline before April 23rd? This question matters because prosecutors are not only trying to prove what happened on one night, they are trying to prove a longer pattern. They say Celeste and Burke had an illegal relationship while she was underage. They say she spent time with him. They say she traveled. They say she communicated with him. They say she was reported missing before. They say her family tried to intervene. They say Burke continued contact. All of that creates the background for motive, but the public record still leaves gaps. Where was Celeste during different periods in 2024 and early 2025? Who saw her? Who knew she was with Burke? What did her family report? What did law enforcement know? What did school officials know? What did friends know? What did her phone records show? What did social media show? What did travel records show? What did Burke's devices show? What did witnesses tell investigators? These questions matter because the prosecution's abuse charge and motive theory may depend on showing a pattern over time. The defense may challenge parts of that pattern. They may ask whether prosecutors can prove the timing of certain events. They may ask whether the relationship evidence meets the legal elements of the charge. They may ask whether digital material was authentic, properly recovered, and clearly connected to Burke. They may ask whether some evidence is being interpreted with hindsight. The prosecution will likely argue the evidence is more than enough. They may point to texts, images, travel, testimony, and device data. The defense will likely argue the state must prove each element. Celeste's timeline is also important for a victim-centered reason. A missing child's movement should never be treated like a side detail. If Celeste was moving between home, school, friends, and places connected to Burke, that timeline may reveal warning signs. It may reveal who tried to help. It may reveal where systems failed. It may reveal how a young girl became isolated from the people trying to protect her. That matters beyond the courtroom. The seventh unanswered question may be the one that creates the most public debate. Will anyone else be charged or become a key witness? Right now, Burke is the known charged defendant in the public record. That must be clear. No one else should be accused without official evidence. But the question of other witnesses is fair. Prosecutors may have people who saw Celeste with Burke, people who visited the home, people who knew about the alleged relationship, people who heard conversations, people who received messages, people who saw the Tesla, people who noticed odors, people who knew about purchases, people who interacted with Burke after September, people who testified or were subpoenaed. The defense will care deeply about any witness who cooperated under pressure. If a witness received protection, immunity, or favorable treatment, the defense will attack credibility. Why are you testifying? Were you promised anything? Were you afraid of being charged? Did you change your story? Did you lie before? Are you blaming Burke because he is famous? Were you trying to save yourself? Those questions can weaken a witness if the testimony stands alone. But if the testimony is backed by records, messages, surveillance, receipts, and forensic evidence, it becomes harder to dismiss. The prosecution may not rely on one witness. They may build the case from layers. That is where the defense faces a challenge. A witness can be attacked. A record can be explained. A piece of trace evidence can be questioned. But if all of them point to the same timeline, the prosecution becomes stronger. The defense's job is to make them point in different directions. The question of Burke's family may also come up. Public reporting has said members of his family were subpoenaed in connection with grand jury proceedings. That does not mean they did anything wrong. It means investigators believed they might have information. They may have information about the car, the address, the travel, family meetings, the relationship, Burke's movements, or communications. The defense and prosecution may both want to know what family members saw, heard, and understood. But again, subpoena does not equal guilt. It is a tool for gathering information. That distinction matters. The same caution applies to friends and associates. A witness can be important without being accused of a crime. A person can be questioned without being charged. A person can know something without being involved. The public must not turn every name into an accusation. The strongest version of this story asks what witnesses may reveal, without declaring what they did. There is also a broader question about possible federal charges. Prosecutors in state court have alleged that digital evidence includes child sexual abuse material. Public reporting has also described a large amount of digital evidence, including phone and iCloud material. When digital material involving minors crosses state lines, uses cloud systems, or involves the internet, federal law can become relevant. But as of the public record used here, Burke's known charges are in Los Angeles County Court. No federal charge has been confirmed, so the safe way to say it is this: federal charges remain a possible legal question, not a confirmed development. That question may depend on what digital evidence shows, how it was created, how it was stored, whether it traveled through interstate systems, and whether federal prosecutors choose to act. For now, the case is being prosecuted in Los Angeles County. That is the confirmed legal track. But the digital evidence may still shape the case heavily, whether in state court or beyond. This brings us back to the defense strategy. The defense does not need to answer every mystery. It needs to create doubt. That is the key. The defense may focus on the alleged weapon. It may focus on what happened inside the home. It may focus on the limits of the autopsy. It may focus on pregnancy remaining unclear. It may focus on message context. It may focus on the months between discovery and arrest. It may focus on Celeste's timeline before April 2003. It may focus on access to the Tesla. It may focus on witness credibility. It may focus on chain of custody. It may focus on whether evidence proves murder or only alleged concealment. That last point may become the heart of the trial. Does the evidence prove Burke killed Celeste? Or does it prove he was connected to what happened after death? Those are not the same thing. The prosecution will argue they cannot be separated. They will say the alleged relationship led to motive. The threat led to action. The ride brought Celeste to the home. The messages showed cover-up. The purchases showed planning. The garage evidence showed handling of the remains. The Tesla tied the final discovery to Burke. The digital evidence tied all of it together. In that view, the evidence is not separate. It is one chain. The defense will try to separate the chain into pieces. A ride proves arrival, not murder. Messages prove communication, not killing. Purchases prove suspicion, not causation. Garage evidence proves handling, not who caused death. The Tesla proves a discovery, not the fatal act. Motive proves pressure, not murder. That is how the defense may frame it. The prosecution's answer will be that no innocent explanation fits all of it, not when viewed together. That is the courtroom war, separate doubt versus connected proof. At the preliminary hearing, prosecutors do not need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They need enough evidence for the case to proceed. That is a lower bar. This means the defense may not expect to win outright at the preliminary hearing. Instead, the defense may use the hearing to test the state. Who testifies? How strong are they? What does the medical examiner say under questioning? What does the detective say? What does the digital evidence show? How clear is the timeline? Are there gaps? Are there witness problems? Are there issues with chain of custody? Are there details prosecutors left out of public filings? The preliminary hearing may become a preview of the trial, not the final battle, the first serious glimpse. The most important moment may not be the most shocking detail. It may be the first time a witness answers, "How do you know? How do you know what happened inside the home? How do you know when Celeste died? How do you know Burke sent messages as a cover-up? How do you know the item found later was tied to the crime? How do you know no one else had access? How do you know the digital evidence shows what you say it shows?" That phrase will shape the case. How do you know? Here on True Crime Greyson, like this video, and subscribe if you want careful updates when this case enters the next courtroom stage. The answers may not come all at once, but every hearing could reveal which side has the stronger timeline. Now look at the 7 questions again. Question 1. Where is the alleged murder weapon? This question tests the physical proof of the killing. Question 2. How do prosecutors know what happened inside the home? This tests whether the state has direct evidence or a strong circumstantial chain. Question 3. Was Celeste pregnant? This tests the difference between public rumor, text message evidence, and medical confirmation. Question 4. What did the messages really say? This tests motive, context, and whether prosecutors are interpreting the argument fairly. Question 5. Where was Burke between discovery and arrest? This tests whether his actions after September may become evidence. Question 6. What was Celeste's full timeline before April 23rd? This tests the alleged relationship, warning signs, and the lead-up to the final night. Question 7. Will anyone else be charged or called as a key witness? This tests access, testimony, cooperation, credibility, and whether the prosecution's case expands. Each question matters alone. Together, they form the defense map. But prosecutors have their own map. Their map starts with the alleged relationship. They say Burke had access to Celeste while she was underage. They say she threatened to expose him. They say he had a career to protect. They say he sent a ride to bring her to his home. They say she was killed soon after arriving. They say he sent messages to create a false trail. They say he traveled after her death. They say he made suspicious purchases. They say evidence from the garage matched Celeste. They say her remains were found in his Tesla. They say the digital record supports the timeline. That is the prosecution's case in plain language. It is not built on one unanswered question. It is built on a pattern. And if prosecutors prove the pattern, the unanswered questions may not save the defense. A missing weapon does not always break a case. An unclear pregnancy issue does not erase motive. A message dispute does not destroy a timeline if other evidence supports it. A witness credibility issue does not defeat a case if records back the witness. A defense question does not equal reasonable doubt unless the jury believes it matters. That is important. Unanswered questions do not automatically mean the defendant is innocent. They mean the courtroom has work to do. The prosecution must answer enough. The defense must make the unanswered parts matter. The jury must decide whether any doubt is reasonable. This is why the case is so tense. Both sides have a path. The prosecution's path is connection. The defense's path is separation. The prosecution says, look at everything together. The defense says, take each claim apart. The prosecution says, the timeline tells the story. The defense says, the timeline has holes. The prosecution says, Burke had motive. The defense says, motive is not murder. The prosecution says, the digital evidence is massive. The defense says, volume is not clarity. The prosecution says, the garage evidence matters. The defense says, after-death evidence is not proof of the fatal act. The prosecution says, the Tesla points back to him. The defense says, access and timing still matter. That is the shape of the fight. There is another layer to this case that must stay clear. Public anger is not evidence. Online theories are not evidence. A dark song is not evidence by itself. A rumor about pregnancy is not evidence. A claim about another person is not evidence unless it enters the record. The case must be built in court. That protects everyone. It protects the defendant's rights. It protects the victim's dignity. It protects the family from false narratives. It protects the public from misinformation. And it protects the final verdict from being weakened by speculation. Celeste's family deserves a case that holds. If prosecutors are right, they must prove it cleanly. If the defense is right, the truth must come out too. That is how justice works. It is not fast. It is not always satisfying. It forces painful facts into narrow legal questions, but it is the only path that can produce a verdict with weight. As of now, Burke remains charged and detained without bail. He has pleaded not guilty. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for June 29th, with a status conference before it. The court will decide whether prosecutors have enough evidence for trial. That hearing may begin answering the 7 questions, or it may create more. Either way, the public should watch carefully, not for the most shocking phrase, not for the most disturbing detail, but for the proof. Watch for the weapon issue. Watch for the home timeline. Watch for the message context. Watch for the pregnancy clarification. Watch for witness testimony. Watch for Tesla access. Watch for digital evidence. Watch for how prosecutors connect the pieces. Watch for how the defense breaks them apart. And watch for Celeste, because she is the reason this case matters. She was 14. Her life should not be reduced to a courtroom strategy. Her name should not disappear beneath Burke's fame. Her family deserves answers that are proven, not guessed. The final question is not just what happened. It is whether the justice system can prove what happened. That question carries the entire case. If prosecutors prove Burke killed Celeste to silence her, the consequences will be severe. If the defense creates doubt about causation, the case may change. If other witnesses emerge, the timeline may expand. If digital evidence reveals more, the public may learn details not yet known. If the preliminary hearing exposes gaps, the defense may gain power. If it strengthens the prosecution's chain, Burke may face an even harder path. For now, 7 questions remain. And until they are answered, the D4vd case is not just a story about what prosecutors allege. It is a story about what the court can prove. A missing child, a final ride, a Hollywood Hills home, a Tesla, a public career, a private accusation, a family waiting, a defendant denying murder, a prosecution building a timeline, a defense looking for gaps, and one young girl whose life ended before any of these legal questions began. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and the answers in this case should begin and end with her. If you want more fact-based updates as the D4vd case moves toward the preliminary hearing, like this video, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe to True Crime Greyson. We will keep following the evidence, the unanswered questions, and the fight for justice for Celeste.